Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the PhinManiacs.com podcast. I am your host, Louis Sung, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Chad Ronnebaum, and once again, joining us is Ronald Caniff at Finn's Broadcaster, Unsquish the Fish, whoever you want to know him as. He's here, and he's ready to rock and roll. How are you, gentlemen?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
So it's been a while since we did a show, but with the off season going on and a lot of and technically speaking, it hasn't even actually started yet. Not much has been done. We've released a few players, and honestly, those were a lot of them were no-brainer situations. We made a trade. I know everybody has mixed feelings on that because it's a trade, and when Mike Tannenbaum does trades, it's always a mixed feelings, regardless of how much of a win it looks like on paper. And, of course, there's going to be free agent speculation because of all the cap space that the Dolphins have recently made for themselves. And we also signed this backup quarterback. I think his name is Dan Marino. That should be something interesting to discuss. And it should set a nice tone for the rest of the offseason. What do you think?
Oh, I think he's a little on the older side, but he's got a lot of experience. He's played in some big games, and I think he'll be a great addition to the team list.
All right, so we'll go ahead and get started now. First and foremost, we're going to discuss all of the off-season moves the Dolphins have started with. They already they decided to release a bunch of players. Mario Williams, of course, he's gone, so that frees up about $7 million. And they also got rid of Earl Mitchell and then the whole Brandon Albert fiasco, which we will discuss shortly. But the Dolphins wound up freeing up over $28 million. I have to look, and I got to go and find the exact number again. But clearly the Dolphins are ramping up to get this whole thing going strong. They want to make sure that they have enough space to do whatever it is they're going to do. They want to re-sign their own players. They want to be able to actually make some moves that will improve the roster instead of just emptying it out just so we can fill it back up with more borderline mediocre talent. Mario Williams turned into a drastic failure. Earl Mitchell was never anything spectacular, so his $4 million is gone now. And we still have to get Andre Branch back in here. We still have to get Kenny Stills still in here. That's going to take a lot of money. So there's going to be a lot that needs to be done. So first and foremost, I want you guys' opinion on this whole situation. Is there anybody the Dolphins should have gotten rid of, and do you agree with what happened that they've already done? I'll start with you, Chad.
Well, it's so difficult right now because I don't know what their overall intentions are. I mean, obviously they're freeing up cap space. I think everybody was pretty much in agreement that it was Mario Williams needed to go. He wasn't healthy this year for the most part, and when he was healthy, he just didn't look like he had the quickness that he needed anymore to play defensive end. And so it was kind of a lost cause for the majority of the year. So I think everybody was okay with that. I am still kind of surprised to see that they haven't released Cole Meese yet. I really have been expecting that to happen as well. And so that kind of gives you an indication of what they're up to. And then Brandon Albert, I didn't want to see him go, but I get it. I know that's a big cap differential, but for the last decade, we've had trouble at the tackle position when then we have an injury. And right now we're back there again. I don't know how high I am on Sam Young. I know he did okay in limited work, but I mean, this is the guy they released after the training camp was over, and he didn't even make the squad. And now they're suddenly counting on him to be their third tackle. So we're basically Army Tunsil, Juwan James injury away from maybe having a subpar tackle, maybe costing us games once again. So I wasn't excited to see Brandon Albert go, but again, I do get it. It's hard to replace a guy like that from a leadership standpoint. So I think the Jags are getting a good player. He did everything we needed when he came in here. We needed a player that could stabilize the left tackle. We needed a player to help turn around what was going on with our offensive line after all the Jonathan Martin fiasco and all the bad play we'd had at tackle. And he did just that. And even on top of that, he took Army Tunsil under his wing and really taught him a lot, I think, in the first year. And And then he went ahead and he allows Miami to facilitate a trade, which he didn't have to do whatsoever. He could have easily forced himself to be cut and just took the highest bidder. And instead, he was agreeable to work out a trade with the Jags, allowing Miami to at least get a late round pick out of the deal. So I can't say enough about Brandon Albert and what he did for the Dolphins in his time here. So, and jumping back what I was referring to, I find it interesting that they are having Brandon Albert go now, and they keeping Komisi. And what that indicates to me is in free agency, Miami is not going to be big players in linebackers. They're probably going to be big players in offensive line. So they're obviously freeing up space for something that could be obviously re-signing somebody like Stills. But I think Miami is going to be in play for one of these guards in the market, one of the higher end guards. And so they're freeing up the cap space to make that move. And by keeping Komisi, that tells me they're planning on drafting linebacking help. And so you wouldn't cut Komisi until you saw what plays out in the draft. So just in case the guys you want don't fall to you or you don't get the guys you need, then you have Komisi as a backup plan, as at least he's a veteran. When healthy, he's not bad. And so that seems to me be what's going on, because if they were going to target a linebacker, that would change that.
Yeah, and well, here's the thing, though. This is actually kind of ironic. The Dolphins actually signed 6 players to the roster, so a lot of those holes are filled for today. Let's see. Kim Bocamper is a new linebacker. We have a couple new quarterbacks, Dan Marino and Bob Greasy, new wide receiver and Nat Moore, and a lot of these names are actually pretty familiar. It's kind of nice to have them back on the roster. And, of course, I'm being completely facetious with all this. This is all just ceremonial things. But, this is funny. Tim Reynolds, who just tweeted out, Mike Tannenbaum at the Marino signing. We're not sure who has the worst knees for our quarterbacks, you or Tannehill.
Yeah.
That's kind of a low blow.
That could be arguable today. I don't think by the time the season gets here it will be, but that's kind of funny.
Oh, here's Larry Little. While looking over his contract, my agent is dead.
That's good.
I'm glad they have senses of humor about this whole thing, because the very idea, like what happened is that these guys, like Marino, Nat Moore, Larry Little, all these guys, they never actually signed paperwork officially to retire from the league. It was always kind of an understood thing. It's like, yeah, they're bazillions of years old, so they're not going to come back and play anytime soon, but they never officially signed the paperwork. So now they are, the Dolphins are in trying to show everybody what it means to be a Miami Dolphin and rewarding those who actually want to stay and be Dolphins and all that sort of thing. They are honoring these alumni and showing how close they are to the organization. So Marino, Greasy, Madison, Nat Moore, Larry Little, all these guys are still close to the organization even today, and they're just honoring them and thanking them for wanting to stay with the franchise for so long, and they're rewarding them. So while that is nice and it's a very heartwarming thing to see, there is speculation that there is more to this ceremony than just saying, look at these alumni and honor them. There is more to it than that. The idea being that doing so will hopefully set the tone for other players who currently are playing, and trying to show them this is what we do to players who are loyal to our franchise. We honor them and we thank them, and all of these things is trying to prove this is why you want to be here, because we care about you guys and we want you to stick around. Do you think that's going to make any kind of a difference for the likes of Kenny Stills, Andre Branch, all these guys that we really need to stick around?
I think it's... go ahead, Chad.
Oh, no, I was just going to say not a whole lot for a guy like Kenny Stills or Andre Branch, but it does kind of set the tone for maybe a guy like Cameron Wake with his extension, because he's it was Cameron Wake 34, and so it seems...
He's 35.
Or 35. So for all intents and purposes, he's going to end his career with the Dolphins, and so I think that's where that comes into play is, hey, if you've got a few years left, wouldn't it be best just to finish it out with the team that you've been with the whole time? Because, I mean, to me, he's the player on the team right now that's going to join that group of guys when he retires. So I think that if a younger guy like Stills, who wasn't even drafted by the Dolphins, I think he's worried about money right now. He's probably not too worried about trying to be in the Ring of Fame for the Dolphins. But it's obviously a positive thing in any event. But I don't know that it'll really help them in contract negotiations.
Ron?
I was just going to say I don't think it makes that big a difference to these guys, to free agents, but I think winning, going to the playoffs, having a guy like Adam Gase, hearing things from the other players that they like being on this team, they like the coaching, they like the direction, those are the things that are going to make a difference. Really the things that we haven't had the past 4 or 5 years, and we've still been able to attract free agents. We have something now we haven't had for years. Those are more important. It's going to make Kenny Stills is probably going to want to stick around. I really think he's going to. He fit with Tannehill. He fit in this offense, and it just kind of worked for him. So a guy like him, I think Andre Branch, he sees a big opportunity here to know that he can come in and be the other guy on the other side of Branch. We've seen when somebody, I should say on the other side of Wake, we've seen what that looks like when you're on the other side of Wake, and Sue in the middle, what that can give you. So those are the things that are going to make those guys want to stay and other free agents come to the team. The Dan Marino thing, yeah, it's kind of nice. I almost think sometimes it's more for the fans than it is for the players.
Well, there is that, but I think the mentality here is that they're trying to continue to push this message of we want to take care of our own, you know? It's kind of this idea of look at us taking care of our own. We maybe it's just all a PR stunt, which it could very well be. I understand that. It certainly doesn't look like anything more than that. But the speculation is that it's kind of trying to send the message, we take care of our own. That means you, Kenny. That means you, Andre. We're going to take care of you. We're going to take care of you too, Rashad and Jarvis. We're going to take care of you guys. We just took care of Cameron. Now we can take care of these other guys. Now we can take care of you too. That's kind of the message that I think they're trying to send. So you're not convinced that any of this kind of gives that idea?
No, honestly, I don't see where it relates, in my opinion. I think most teams respect their elder, or I shouldn't say their elders, their vets or their alumni, except for maybe the Patriots.
Well,
they don't really seem to care much.
Yeah,
but most of their vets
respecting their elders.
aren't that old.
It's respecting their elders. It's respecting their elders.
I should say their alumni. I guess the Patriots alumni, though. I mean, most of their alumni isn't anything good because they really haven't been good in the last 10, 15 years. But so it's kind of hard to say what that'll look like in years down the road if they were to sign Tom Brady to a one-year deal. Or one-day deal. I don't see that happening. But I don't know. I don't get it. I'm not sure I understand this whole let's sign these guys for a day contract. I don't get it.
It's just I think it's just because these guys. I don't think these guys officially signed paperwork to say we're retired, we can't come back.
Okay.
Like, for all intents and purposes, they were free agents for the past 25 years or whatever.
Okay.
I mean, that's just what it is, man. Whatever. So that's what's going on now, at least at the time of this recording. They are currently in the process of announcing these signings, which is a very heartwarming thing, but according to our panelists, it does not actually do much for anything moving forward. Speaking of moving forward, here we are again. We're having to discuss the whole negotiations with Kenny Stills and Andre Branch. Now, a lot of people were hoping that maybe the Dolphins would be able to get Stills in for like $6 or $8 million. And that's not going to happen. It's just not. Just based on the market and based on the way that wide receivers are getting paid, based on Stills' role in the offense. That's the bigger thing here. Is not so much his production, but what's his role. It's very easy to pick up leverage based on a certain aspect. You can either use your stats to pad the reasons why you need to stay, or you can cite your role in the offense. Like for Jarvis Landry, he's a slot receiver, but he's going to probably cite his statistics and his impact in the offense as to why the Dolphins need to pay him a boatload of money. Maybe somewhere along the lines of what a Doug Baldwin got with the Seattle Seahawks. So that's going to be a nice chunk of cash right there. And for Kenny Stills, while his stats aren't necessarily through the roof, he did score a lot of touchdowns for the Dolphins last season, and so that's going to make a difference. He's the points scorer. He's the field stretcher. He's the guy who runs down the field and outruns everybody to the end zone. So that's something that the Dolphins haven't had for a while. They tried with Mike Wallace. It didn't work for various reasons, and I will admit at the time Tannehill wasn't a great deep ball thrower. He was okay, but he's certainly improved since those days. And Wallace didn't exactly help matters with his unwillingness to actually try and catch the football. So that didn't work out. But now that Stills filled that role that Wallace was supposed to fill, he's in line for a big payday. So that's probably why the Dolphins are trying to push this whole, we want to take care of our own, we want to make sure that you're back. And Stills has made it clear that he wants to come back to Miami. He won the Nat Moore Community Service Award for the team. It's not like, I don't think players are obligated to go to these things. So if you win that award, that means that you volunteered for this. That means that you felt compelled enough to go out there and do this because you wanted to do it. And making that sort of an impact does leave some sort of resonance on players. So for you to do that, for you to be willing to do that, that means that you do actually have some investment in the football team. And I'm sure that if the Dolphins at least give him a reasonable offer, if they don't lowball him, I think Stills will come back. But if they give him if they try to make him take like a $3 million per year discount, then I think Stills will just kind of look the other way and see what else is going on in the free agent market. That's the thing we have to consider here.
Yeah, I think that the Dolphins have learned from past mistakes on not signing guys they should sign, and I feel like Branch and Stills are both going to be Dolphins in 2017. That's just my opinion, and I feel they should be Dolphins in 2017.
Chad?
It's really about the numbers for me. I like Stills and I like Brent both, and I really would like to see them come back. But I'm trying to wrap my head around what Stills has done, and so I understand the value for Kenny Stills is he's only 24 and he doesn't have any severe injury history, so it's easy to give a long-term deal to a guy like that. But I mean, last year was clearly his best year, and that was around 900 yards. I want to say 9 touchdowns, which is a good year, but this Kenny Stills, in my mind, is not going to be confused with A.J. Green or Des Bryant or Julio Jones. He just is not an elite wide receiver like those guys. And the kind of money that they're throwing around it's very reminiscent to me is Olivier Vernon, where I looked at Olivier Vernon as a good defensive end, but not a guy like Ndamukong Suh or a guy that can just take a game over. And so he got paid a monster contract from the Giants. I didn't want to see him go. I wanted him to stay, but it would have been an enormous mistake by the Dolphins to give the contract to Olivier Vernon that the Giants gave to him. And I feel very similar with Kenny Stills in that is Kenny Stills that good, or is Adam Gase that good? Because Kenny Stills has been in the league several years now, and he hasn't really done anything until he was playing under Adam Gase. And so I think he is cognitively aware of that. I agree with you guys. I think he wants to stay. I think he realizes one of the reasons he had such a good year and he had so much success was he was being put into position to succeed by Adam Gase. And so if he just takes the money, in particular, if he focuses on a per year amount, that's going to be a big mistake for Kenny Stills because he needs to worry about guaranteed money. And so what my hope is that what Miami's thinking is that, look, this guy's 24. He fits right now. We don't want to create another hole. Let's give him a nice chunk of money up front. Let's risk the injury versus pay him a premium per year. And so I would much rather see them guarantee maybe 50 to 75% of a 4 or 5 year deal with a lesser amount per year, but basically an investment into the player that they want him here for the next 4 or 5 seasons, but not at like $10, $11 million a year. I think that would be a mistake. I think that Adam Gase is fully capable of getting a different receiver in here to play with Landry and Parker and have success. So I think it's kind of a give and take on that. And I like him again. I think he's a good wide receiver. I just don't think he's that good. And I don't view him the same as Landry. I think Landry is very special, what Landry does. I mean, you just watch what Landry does on film. I mean, whether it's the special teams or the unbelievable plays he seems to make every week where he breaks a tackle and gets an extra 20 yards or even a touchdown. And Landry, in my mind, is clearly one of the best slot receivers in the NFL. And I don't think very many people are going to argue that he is one of the best. Whereas Stills, I'm kind of looking at a guy that, maybe he's in the top 20 wide receivers in the league, but he's definitely not in that top 10 elite class of wide receivers I was referring to earlier, like a Julio Jones or an A.J. Green. So I think you just got to keep it in perspective. What is it worth to not create the hole versus what does that mean over the next 4 or 5 years for what kind of money Kenny Stills is looking for? So again, I think the give and take is Miami needs to give him a big guarantee to show that they want him here for those 4 years, and Stills has to realize making $10 million a year but not having a big guarantee is nothing but a recipe of being cut in 2 to 3 seasons.
Well, here's the other thing that I don't think we touched on last time we discussed this. And this is not to cast aspersions on anyone, because I'm sure that these guys are all highly motivated in and of themselves. But here is the thing that the Dolphins have to also be wary of, because we have seen situations in the past where once a player gets paid, suddenly their motivation to be the star that they were supposed to be when they actually signed the contract, it just kind of goes away. And that's the thing, that giving a ton of guaranteed money can cause issues, because if you guarantee a ton of cash and these guys decide to sit back and say, well, I got my money, I can chill out now, then there's nothing the Dolphins can do. They're trapped. Now, I know for a fact that if they did that situation with Landry, that Landry, just based on who he is and what we've seen on and off the field, that Landry is not going to be that kind that just takes plays off now that he got his paycheck. But we're not as familiar with Stills, and I'm not even trying to say that Stills would be getting lazy if he signed that contract, but I'm saying that is something that the Dolphins have to consider going into negotiations, and I think that's why teams don't like giving a whole lot of guaranteed cash up front, because if something happens and these guys, not even necessarily injuries or he's getting too old, it's more along the lines of what happens if this guy just decides he really doesn't want to play, then we're trapped.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Ryan.
I was going to say, I think that's the risk you always take with every free agent is every time you sign a free agent, or in this case, it's our player, though. So it just usually seems to work out better when you're signing your own player, even though I understand we didn't draft him, but he's still our player now. It's always a risk you take when you give somebody more money that they just kind of give up on you. I mean, that's just kind of goes with it. You got to take that chance sometimes. If there's something indicating to you that you think Kenny Stills could be that guy, then that might be a reason to want to pay him less or try and walk away. But, I mean, that's the risk with every single free agent. I mean, if you always didn't do it because, they might take the money and not play hard, you wouldn't sign any free agents. You wouldn't sign any of your guys to bigger contracts. It's just the risk you take. So they just have to weigh that out and see, well, is there a reason why they think that might be the case? Didn't seem to be from his play that there would be that reason, but we're not inside the locker room.
No, I didn't.
Yeah,
that's
a legitimate
why.
Point. I mean, we have a legitimate point, Lewis, but I don't sense that I'm too worried about it with Stills. I get a lot more worried about that with the interior guys, especially like D tackles, because of the balance they run of having to stay in enough shape to be physically able to do it, but not get overweight. And so I don't think Stills is going to be an issue where he's not paying attention or he's just out of shape or anything like that. But the bigger risk always is injury. And so, if you guarantee a player more money, you're running the risk that he's going to blow out his knee and not be the same player. And there's nothing you can do because you already guaranteed him all that money off your cap. The real trade-off is what you're trying to decide is this player going to be able to give me 4 or 5 years of that level of play? And if they can, it's in your best interest to give them the bigger guarantee and make their deal more cap-friendly. And so, rather than paying a guy essentially $10 million for 2 years, even though it's a 5-year deal, you want to pay him, $7 million or $6 million over 5 years, but he knows as a player he's getting, 25 or 30 million of that for sure. And so that's the trade-off. And I think Stills is a player where my preference is to roll the dice and say, I would rather not pay him a massive amount per year. I would rather commit to him over 4 or 5 years, because he seems like physically he's as healthy as anybody you're going to draft. I mean, he's only 24 and he hasn't had any major injuries that affect his gameplay. And so you got to feel like he's about the same risk as a guy you pick up in the draft of playing 4 or 5 years. And so other than he's also a proven player, and that's why his market value is so high, because it's not easy to find a 24-year-old player that's in really good health. And so, I mean, that's a guy that you can get those deals in place on. But I don't feel like if you get his per year number up so high that he's done enough to feel like he is a $10 or $11 million a year wide receiver. What has he done that makes you guys think that he's that? You know, when you get to $10 or $11 million, you're getting into the top 10 wide receivers. And when I start comparing him to the names that are there, those are elite number one guys that are extremely difficult to stop one-on-one. I mean, Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, and that's just not who Kenny Stills is. He's just a good wide receiver. He's not one of these big, fast wide receivers you just can't cover one-on-one.
Well, that once again bounces into what is his role. Who scored more touchdowns for the Dolphins than Kenny Stills last year?
Oh, nobody. But again, you're talking about 9 touchdowns. You're not talking about 15 touchdowns or something like that. And so Kenny Stills does force a team to maybe play safety up top because he does have the ability to burn guys deep with his speed.
And he doesn't take bazillions of plays off like Mike Wallace did, which makes him even more valuable.
Not even comparable. I mean, he's much, much better than was. And I'm not trying to suggest that I think Kenny Stills is a bad player. I'm just trying to figure out how much of your salary cap do you want contributed into Stills, because we do have to sign Landry yet, and we do have the Tannehill contract, we do have the Sue contract, and you just got to look at what does that mean down the road if you put that much money into Stills. It is what is it? His role is right now he's one of the 3 top wide receivers on the team. He had a really good year. He made some big plays, but how much do you pay him on your cap that it limits you from getting other positions or other players signed? And so you got to look around and say, all right, if you're looking at an irreplaceable player, how irreplaceable is Kenny Stills? And I think he is replaceable. It's just not something that if you do replace him, you're still going to have to spend that money, or you have to spend a decent draft pick, because I think what the plan was we'll see how Stills does. We're not quite sure if we're going to retain Kenny Stills or not. So they made the move last year to get Carew. And the bad part right now for the Dolphins is Carew was struggling to even dress. And so he clearly is not a guy I think anybody would feel good about saying, let's just let Stills go and let's just elevate Carew into be our 3rd wide receiver. And he just doesn't have the same skill set, and he can't do what Kenny Stills can do. And so the situation for the Dolphins is they either got to put money into a 3rd wide receiver or draft one high. And so really for Stills is where is he going to fall at? And he is going to get a lot of interest on the market, because probably the most comparable player to Stills hitting the free agent market would be Deshaun Jackson. And I want to say he's 30. I don't know that Stills is as fast as Deshaun Jackson, but he's going to be a lot more attractive to teams just based on his age and health.
And he's already been connected to his former team, the Eagles, not to mention the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because apparently he would be a big help to Jameis Winston. They're going to have 2 Jacksons on that team if they sign Deshaun Jackson.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Oh, they'll probably.
Jackson's a lot harder to put big money into because he's 30, and so Stills is a lot easier from a risk standpoint to put the big money into. So we'll see. I do think Ron wants to stay in Miami. I think Ron's right. I mean, and you've even pointed out the community stuff. I think he gets along really well with Tannehill and Landry, and this is a good spot for him. And so I do think he'll give Miami a little bit of a discount, but within reason. I mean, I think that there's no way around it. Stills is going to test the market. He's not going to sign before the market because his market is so unknown. I mean, his market could be $6 or $7 million a year, and that's really what he's going to get offered. And there might be a team, especially with some of these teams that have enormous cap spaces that have to worry about salary cap floors. Somebody may pay him $11 or $12 million a year just because they have the cap space to do it. And so it's one of those things that's so tough because you don't want to see him go, but you also don't want to do a contract that's foolish for the stability of your team for the next few years.
Well, here's the other thing then. If you let Kenny Stills go, then suddenly the offense loses a very important facet of what it is. And I'm sorry to all the Devontae Parker fans out there, but Kenny Stills is, as of right this second, I would still take Kenny Stills over Devontae Parker. I just would, just based on what I've seen and what it looks like.
The thing about Parker, I mean, this is what and again, it's the offseason, so we're having these dreaming. So let's say we re-sign Stills. And the thing about Parker is we know what has Parker been missing over the last 2 years. It's not
consistency.
But it's not even consistency. It's a professional's off season. He has yet to come in to an off season from day one and do what a professional needs to do in the off season and in training camp to be ready to play the season. He has all the talent. I mean, we can clearly see he's talented. He has all the physical abilities. I mean, you and I, Lewis, have been within feet of him before and seen him, just go up and down the sideline with the trainers, and he's just physically so gifted. So much more you could see it than even the other receivers there. But he just hasn't been a professional. He hasn't done what a professional is supposed to do. But he was called out on that this past training camp by Adam Gase. He really was, and Jefferson as well, by the wide receiver coach. So I think that this offseason, if he's doing what he's supposed to be doing, he's going to really add a huge piece to the team, especially if we have Kenny Stills too. And then we haven't even talked about, obviously we're like ignoring it right now as if this show was recorded before it happened or something, Julius Thomas as well, which I know we're going to get into that here in a bit.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we're talking about Devontae Parker could be a huge piece for us and a cheap piece right now. If he has a good professionals offseason the way he should, if he trains in the offseason like these other guys do, like Landry does, then I just don't see any reason why Parker won't be a big contributor. I don't know what it'll look like. I don't know if he'll be that corner of the end zone, throw it up to him kind of guy that we've seen little bits and flashes of, but it's never really materialized. But if he does what he's supposed to do this offseason, he's going to contribute big. I have no doubt in my mind.
Well, the problem with Parker is that, and again, I understand what you're saying, but the fact that he's able to show these flashes at all is really a sign that he can do it. It's just how much of a drive does he have to be great? And the other thing that my friend Duke, he's been on the show before many times, he keeps warning me about Parker's ability to make separation as the X receiver. The fact that he keeps that most of his plays, guys, if you notice, are him acting like a slot guy. It's not usually down the sidelines making the tough catch. It's usually, whenever we saw him make a big play, he was usually running across the middle of the field. Like almost like he was running as a really skinny tight end or something like that. And when you put somebody in the slot, it's so they can get separation without having to fight with the cornerback the whole way there.
Again, I think it comes down to preparation and practice. I think that's a lot of his issue because physically I'm telling you, this guy is physically a dominating guy just as an athlete. I'm not even really talking about as a wide receiver. As an athlete, he's extremely physical, extremely athletic, and he's just thrown away his first 2 years, honestly. Just thrown them away by not doing what he's supposed to be doing, by not taking care of himself, by not practicing the way he should practice and doing the things he should do. That's just the truth. If he would just do that one good full off season, I think you would see a completely different Parker, and all those, all these misconceptions about him would disappear in an instant.
I don't know. I just don't think that Parker is enough to justify removing Kenny Stills because of what he's done.
I'm dreaming of keeping Kenny Stills and having Parker as that guy as well. He's a different kind of guy. Parker and Stills, they're two totally different. Every receiver just about we have on this team, if you take 5 receivers and Landry, Parker, Stills, Carew, and Grant, I mean, they all bring 5 totally different skill sets in my mind. I don't know what skill sets Carew really brings yet, but they all bring 5 different things to the table, which is exciting and interesting. And then Julius Thomas is kind of like going to be an X factor too, as well in that. So it's very exciting because now we know that we have a coach that knows what to do with these guys and how to make it all work. But the more pieces you have that can contribute, the more explosive this offense is going to be.
Yeah, Well, here's the other thing to discuss then, and glad you brought it up, Ron. The whole Leonte Carew thing, and we're going to segue this right now. We all know that Mike Tannenbaum traded up to get his hands on Leonte Carew. And we also know that he traded up to get Xavier Howard. When you trade up for somebody, that means you are giving up draft picks. Nobody likes giving up draft picks. Everybody hates when Tannenbaum gives up draft picks. It's one of their pet peeves about the man. It's the reason everybody hates him. It's part of the reason, I think, Ron, that you don't necessarily like him all that much. It's his willingness to give up picks and his lack of ability to evaluate talent. Carew has been a disappointment. However, let's be perfectly honest, with who we had on the field most of the time, Stills, Parker, Landry, who would you have bumped out to even let Carew get a shot at it? I mean, let's be perfectly honest about it. When you have three guys who can start, where does Carew fit in?
Well, he doesn't really fit in right now at all, honestly. And to tell you the truth, with Tannenbaum, I think he's so poor at the draft evaluation process. I say his skills are in trading and free agent. I trust him more on that end than I trust him on drafting. So if Tannenbaum's going to be our guy and we got to build this team, trade them all away. I say trade all your picks away. I don't trust him to make any picks. That's just my opinion.
You would not be a friend of the Dolphins Twitter. Chad, were you going to say something?
No, I just laughing. I think Tannenbaum's. I like that he's a mover and a shaker. I know you can't parallel in any fashion fantasy football to the real NFL, but on one level, I can tell you, as you guys been learning about as fantasy football, the teams that are successful at making trades tend to be the teams that win. And in the NFL, it's just stagnant. It's so hard to make trades in the NFL. And I like the fact that Tannenbaum's in there. You saw him bring Alonzo Maxwell last year. You've seen him bring in Julius Thomas over this year. He's one of the few guys that actually facilitate trades. And so I like that about Tannenbaum. I don't disagree on his ability to evaluate talent, but I can tell you right now, this isn't as much of a democracy as a dictatorship, and this is Adam Gase's team. The guy's a monster. I mean, you just look at him, his intensity, he's all over it. And so I don't think this year, I mean, last year was his first year. He was a rookie head coach just getting in here. But this year, I think in particular, I think Adam Gase more than anybody is going to be deciding who's getting picked in the draft. And I don't think anybody has a problem with that. So I think Tannenbaum's going to be sitting down. He's going to understand who Gase wants, what Gase wants to do, and he's going to do whatever he can do to get those guys for Gase. So he's much more of a facilitator versus a guru at finding hidden players. That I would absolutely agree with that. Carew, I don't understand the Carew trade. I still don't understand it because other than that was my only thought was they were looking at this year in Stills and looking at Carew maybe as their third wide receiver this year. But the only player on the team that Carew would replace probably would be Landry because I don't think he has the size or the speed to replace either Parker or Stills on the outside. He just isn't fast enough. But he does have exceptional hands. Carew's got very good hands. He's built like a tank. He's a big physical wide receiver with hands, but he isn't real fast. And so I could literally see him playing on the team Landry's role, where you can allow him to get into the middle of the field and get the ball to him and have him taking shots from linebackers and safeties and doing the blue collar work in the middle of the field. Now, obviously, when you have somebody like Landry, you don't really need him. But if Landry were to get hurt, I could see Carew having value in that capacity. But it really is concerning to me that he got beat out for the fourth wide receiver spot. I mean, by the end of the year, he wasn't even getting to dress. And so I don't know if that's lack of attention in practice or lack of talent or what the deal is, but I'm hoping that Carew was just going crazy this offseason on conditioning and anything he can do to get his peak performance better because he clearly wasn't quite there. And that's one thing you're always going to get with Adam Gase. It doesn't matter if you're paid $15 million a year. It doesn't matter if you're a number one pick, and it doesn't matter if you're a guy off the street. The guy that's playing is the guy that is the most prepared and it's putting forth the effort. If you're not, you don't stick around very long on Adam Gase's team. I mean, you can ask several players from last year. If you're not beating to his drum, you're not going to be on the field. So for whatever reason, Carew has not been beating to that drum. And so I'm hoping that that turns around and they can still get some use out of him. But irregardless, he's not going to be the answer to replace Stills right now in the game plan. So they're either going to have to come up with a way to pay Stills or bring somebody else in. I don't think you can just let Stills walk and not have to invest money or draft picks to replace him.
Yeah, so far that trade has looked like a wash. And another trade that, yes, now we're finally going to get to discuss it. Another trade that was recently done, of course, was the Dolphins decided to go ahead and trade for former Jaguars tight end Julius Thomas, who, of course, has connections with Gase back during their days in Denver. So that trade is something that I can absolutely get on board with because of what Julius Thomas was able to accomplish when he was in an Adam Gase offense in Denver. Now, before, we could have made the argument, well, that was actually a John Fox deal more than Adam Gase, because, yes, Adam Gase pretty much followed John Fox around for a little while before he finally wound up landing in Miami as the new head coach. But after seeing what we did this past season, we know for a fact that it's not just John Fox being a genius and Adam Gase following in his footsteps. Adam Gase knows what he's doing with an offense on his own. He doesn't need somebody there to tell him what to do to run the offense. And he doesn't need Peyton Manning at his peak to be able to get an offense running. So that's why there's some faith in the whole idea of Julius Thomas being the Miami Dolphins tight end. Now, I understand. This is something that everybody's been getting upset about. We traded a draft pick, however low it may be, for a guy who hasn't played in a full season his entire career. Not one time has Julius Thomas ever played 16 games in a season. I get that. Ankle injuries, back injuries. I think there was a wrist injury in there somewhere. I think the only thing he hasn't had is a concussion, which I guess if you want to go there, I guess that's better than Jordan Cameron, because he's had like 4 now, and I don't even know if he's going to play anymore. So if you think about it, we have tried for the past several years to get our hands on a veteran potential star tight end, and each time it has backfired on us for one reason or another. Remember Dustin Keller? Before he even got to hit the regular season, DJ Swearinger, then of the Houston Texans, took him out, and he never got on the field again for the Dolphins, or anybody else for that matter. So much for Dustin Keller. That didn't work out. Then we tried Jordan Cameron. He didn't work out because he and Tannehill never could get it going, and Cameron never actually looked like the guy he was in Cleveland, as crazy as that sounds. So clearly the concussions had an impact on him, and he got himself another concussion and wound up not playing anymore. He only played in 4 games this past season, and he will not be back if he plays anybody else ever again. So now here we are again, trying one more time, this time with Julius Thomas, who has a history with Adam Gase, who told Jordan Cameron that, hey, dude, you need to take a pay cut because this guy can revitalize your career. That didn't happen. He got hurt, so that didn't work out so good. And now he's going to be a Miami Dolphin. He might get hurt sometime during the season. The trade has been getting a lot of positive feedback. It's also been getting a lot of negative feedback, particularly from some national media. I don't know if you guys were aware of it, but I briefly got into a short debate on Twitter with Jorge Sedano of ESPN over the logic of making the trade, because when you boil it down, even though that is technically 2 separate trades with the Jaguars, Brandon Albert for a 2008 7th rounder, Julius Thomas for a 2017 7th rounder, we're exchanging 7th rounders in separate years and trading the 2 players. I don't know why it's 2 separate trades. I guess it's because it just made it simpler for both parties. Fine, whatever. You want to play that way, we can do that way. Madden does that all the time. Oh, wait, I forgot this player. Let me go and make another trade for him. And both players, of course, Albert and Thomas, are going to be redoing their contracts and taking pay cuts to play with their new teams. We don't know the terms of those contracts yet because March 9th is when the trades can actually become official. So we're probably not going to hear much about the contracts until we get closer to that deadline, if not right at the deadline. But the problem here is that everybody's upset because we made a trade. A 7th round draft pick. We traded another draft pick to get a guy who is unproven. And not only that, if you want to look at it from Jorge Sedano's standpoint, which I'll briefly summarize, he looked at the fact that we traded our injury-prone left tackle, which Brandon Albert is injury-prone, fine, we'll give you that, for an injury-prone tight end. He didn't think that was a good idea because left tackles are inherently more valuable to the teams than tight ends, which on paper and in a vacuum, that is true. If you want to have, you would be better off having a star left tackle than you would having a star tight end, just because protecting the quarterback is more important than having a superstar weapon who can't be utilized if your quarterback is on his back. That's something that Ryan Tannehill knows full well, and we as Dolphins fans are well acquainted with. Now, here's the situation, though, and this is what I don't know if maybe Sedano just got tired of arguing with me or if I actually stumped him or not. I personally, for my own ego, I would like to believe the latter, but that's neither here nor there. I would like to think that the fact that I brought up Laramie Tunsil as the trump card makes the trade a good one. Yes, we dumped Albert for a tight end, which his position is not as valuable. But we could afford it because Laramie Tunsil is here to be the heir to Brandon Albert, which makes all the difference. If Tunsil were not here, then absolutely, this trade is ridiculous because now we have a humongous hole at left tackle and at left guard. So it's ridiculous. But because Tunsil is here, we can afford to make that trade. Tunsil gets to go back to his natural position at left tackle, which everybody wanted him to be before last season, if anybody remembers. And we only have to look for a couple of guards, assuming we don't re-sign Jermon Bushrod to play right guard again at a cheap price, which I'm sure if he wants to keep playing, he will probably look for a smaller price tag anyway. So that's my thoughts on it. Julius Thomas for Brandon Albert is a good thing, and it's all because of Laramie Tunsil. It's not what we gave up. It's not who we gave up. It's the fact that who is taking the place of the guy who we are getting rid of. Tunsil is better than Albert, in my opinion. Not only that, he's younger and he's not as injury prone. So all in all, it looks like the Dolphins won this trade. It doesn't matter if we gave up a draft pick or not.
Well, I guess you could call it that. I really don't think it's a trade in that I think either piece would have moved without the other. I think Brandon Alberts was not going to be on the Dolphins next year. They decided, looking at their cap space, they couldn't afford to pay him to be the third tackle.
Yeah, that's the part I forgot to mention. I'm glad you mentioned that. They were originally going to cut him, and then the Jaguars said, hold on, we'll take him.
Yeah, I mean, there's value in getting the contract and then be able to negotiate. But my point being is I don't think Julius Thomas was going to be on the Jaguars and Brandon Albert wasn't going to be on the Dolphins. They just happened to be matched up, and so they're exchanging them. But again, if it hadn't worked out one way or the other, I think both players would have still made the same moves. It would have still been the same trades. It just happened to work out that way. In terms of getting Julius Thomas, I mean, as you know, Lewis, I've been saying since the offseason again, Adam Gase wants an athletic tight end that can really catch the ball and can really run. He has to be fast. And I like Deion Sims. He's a decent all-around tight end, but Deion Sims absolutely physically cannot do what Julius Thomas can. I understand he isn't. He does have injury concerns, and I kind of got made fun of yesterday on Twitter, but I'm still sticking by it. Don't discount Miami drafting a tight end still out because a two tight end offense that is potent is very difficult to stop, and it's very handy to have when it gets later in the season if you need to be a little more run heavy. And before all the fiasco with Aaron Hernandez, you guys just have to look back and remember how tough the Patriots were when they had that offense where they'd put Hernandez and Gronk on the field together. And when you have two really good tight ends, they can both really catch the ball and they're hard to cover one-on-one. So don't count the Dolphins out just yet from maybe using a higher draft pick on a tight end. So I want to keep that in perspective because I think some of the negative comments about Thomas is I think some people had their heart set on Miami getting their hands on the tight end from the U. And
David Nkujo? I don't know how to say his last name. That's just how it's spelled.
You know, it'd be great to get him, but you just got to keep in mind you have no control over what happens in the NFL draft. And so what Tannenbaum with the Dolphins did is they've immediately given Adam Gase an athletic tight end, and that changes everything in the offense. This team is looking scary in the red zone right now. Even if we don't have Stills, if you've got to cover Devontae Parker, whether you think's good or positive or not on Parker, he's dangerous down the red zone because he's got very good hands and he can get up in the air and high point catch footballs. So you can't just forget Devontae Parker in the red zone. You've got to have a capable guy over on him. And
Parker just needs to work on getting his feet down inbounds. That's all.
I mean, Parker took over in the Rams game. He made some phenomenal catches there. And so my disappointment being is when you bring Julius Thomas in and Miami has the ball on the other team's 20-yard line, what a arsenal you have now with Parker or Thomas, and you can send those guys into the backs of the end zone, and you've got to fall back with them because they're so big and able to go up and get the football, and that leaves somebody like Landry open underneath, or Jay Ajayi running the ball underneath. So it was a critical pick. Miami really has no starting tight end on the roster, so you bring in a guy in that gives them immediately a very talented, capable tight end who had monstrous stats when he was on the same teams with Gase. So I like the trade, and it does. I mean, he's just so more. You have so much more play capability with Julius Thomas than you with Deion Sims on what you can do. You can send that guy down the middle of the field, and I don't know if you guys have watched much film on him, but he is very, very capable. So I think it's a good pick, and I hope he stays healthy. I understand that aspect of it, but when you're looking at it from the standpoint, we didn't have anybody that could do the stuff he can do. It's a very good starting point to get him in the building.
No comment, Ron?
Oh, I got plenty of comment. First of all, I'd like to say that by not bringing this up at the very beginning, we buried the lead. But anyway, I'm just kidding.
Next time you can be the host, brother. I'd like to talk more anyway.
You totally buried the lead. But anyway, I absolutely love this trade. And I don't love it for what we saw Julius Thomas do with the Broncos back in the day with Adam Gase. I want you to think back through the season because we're all big Dolphins fans, so we pretty much saw every minute of every game. Think about once the season got going, once things started to kind of smooth out. Think about what we were able to get from the tight end position at any given time. We were really able to get some good plays from Deion Sims. All of a sudden, Deion Sims, of all people, started just catching touchdowns, and guys like they were just bringing guys off the street. And they were out there making big plays because this offense, just for whatever reason, and I'm not an offensive guru, was just screaming for an athletic tight end. It's all you got to do is just put that athletic tight end in there, and plays were just gonna happen. We just didn't have it because Cameron was hurt, and Deion Sims is okay, and I'd really like to see us re-sign Deion Sims because I believe he's a free agent, and I think he's a nice.
They still want him.
Yeah, and I hope that they keep him, and I hope that they can get him for a decent deal because I'd rather go that route than draft another tight end because I really feel like every draft pick that we own needs to go to the defensive side of the ball. And I think that's might be, of course I said this last offseason, that might be what you see us setting up right now. Where what they set up last year was different. They went and traded for some defensive pieces because they wanted to spend draft picks on offense. Now, it's neither here nor there whether they spent it the right way, but I think this time is opposite. Let's re-sign Kenny Stills. Let's trade for Julius Thomas. Let's get Tunzel over to the left tackle where he belongs. Who knows what else they'll do? They'll probably sign some more guards, offensive guards in free agency. Let's just do all that so we can save our picks for the defensive side of the ball. But I love this Julius Thomas trade. I just think, especially, let's see what this contract looks like, because right now his contract's pretty hefty. It's not very cap friendly currently, what we got. So assuming it can be renegotiated to something a little bit more manageable, which obviously I guess they wouldn't have done the trade without that happening. I'm excited about it because this offense, if you just think about what the tight ends we had, and I don't want to call them scrubs because I don't want to be mean to them, but they are lower end on the tight end scale for the NFL, the guys that we had. I mean, literally guys off the street, former quarterback and things like that. You put in Julius Thomas into that, I just think it fits so perfectly into to piggyback off what Chad said, the red zone threat now, with assuming that, and again, I'm really going to be hopeful that Parker does what he needs to do this offseason. But if Parker could just be part of what we think he's always been, and then you add in Thomas and you've got Landry, you keep Stills. I mean, what are you gonna? And we know that this Adam Gase offense works. It's not like we're guessing this time. We've seen it with our own eyes. We know that Tannehill can go run this offense, and you give them these kind of weapons. I feel like it's, and then I mean we're not even talking about the running back in Ajayi and just what a monster he was once we got the offensive going there. I mean it could be a top 10 offense for sure. I mean a top 10 offense in the NFL. And then it's just got to worry about that defensive side of the ball because we know there's all kinds of problems there. And perhaps this isn't even the show for that because we could talk about that for hours. But the offensive side is really looking pretty exciting.
You do have a point there, Ron, but here's the other thing that we need to discuss, and I hate that we have to continue to discuss it every single year. The offensive line, gentlemen, and I understand the point where it's like, why do we have to continue to have these discussions? Why do we have to continue to worry about the possibility that the Dolphins may not be able to keep their protection up? The fact that they won't be able to run block. We had something going, admittedly, with Brandon Albert, with Laramie Tunsil, and then when Pouncey was there, the short time he was there, and of course Bushrod and James. I don't like James there that much anymore. I don't think he's necessarily good enough to handle it at this point. He's just not been what I had hoped he would be, considering we used the first-round draft pick on him. He's a right tackle, not even a left tackle. We drafted him specifically to be a right tackle, and that just didn't work out. It doesn't seem to be working out. He was the weak link, I think, on the offensive line all year long, because it just seems like every time something happened that was good, James got called for holding. And people come at me with, it was actually Bushrod who was the worst of the starting players. And I'm like, no, not really. If you want to say talent-wise, then maybe you could make the argument that Bushrod was the worst. But based on the overall impact, it was James, because it felt like every single time the Dolphins did something right, Juwan James got called for something. Bushrod didn't get called for nearly as many penalties. And he didn't do too bad, guys. I mean, maybe you guys disagree with me. I don't know. But I really don't think Bushrod was that bad this season. Do you feel that way?
No, not at all. I thought Bushrod, considering he had to shift, he was historically a tackle. And so I thought Bushrod did just fine. And assuming he still wants to play, I mean, he's getting towards the end of his career. I don't see any reason why Bushrod wouldn't be back as somebody that is going to compete for the right guard job. And it really reasonable chance he'll win it. I do, again, I feel like just watching the cuts, the reason Albert's gone and the reason Misi is still here is Miami's intending to do just what Ron wants them to do. I think they're intending to use their draft to add defensive guys on the front seven. And I think they're intending to use free agency to go after guards. And so do I think Bushrod is going to be a Pro Bowl guard? No. I think Bushrod is a lot better guard, though, than Billy Turner or Dallas Thomas were doing. And
there's a stretch.
Yeah, that's not hard to say. But Bushrod is definitely a guy that you could bring in and do a decent job. I don't think he's ever going to be a dominant guard, so I think that's where he's fitting in right now. Juwan James it's going to be interesting when his contract's up because he was a first-round pick. He's been up and down. He's clearly better than a lot of the other right tackles we've had that we were getting off the free agent market for the last decade.
Oh, yeah.
He gives him a decent right tackle right now, but he's not a guy that's probably ever going to be a Pro Bowl tackle. And so Miami needs to address it. They just have so many other pressing needs that it's hard to take a decent tackle, even though he's not a dominant tackle, and try to go get a dominant tackle. I mean, if they get lucky and somehow get another Laramie Tunsil type player fall in their lap, of course. But we've got to get a defensive tackle. We've got to get a defensive end. We've got to get some linebacking help. And so that all appears that lining up for the draft right now. And what a guy like Julius Thomas does is he allows the Dolphins to facilitate that. There's nobody out there on the free agent market that's more athletic capable than Julius Thomas. I mean, he's really impressive athletically. And in the draft, you'd have to be using a high pick, probably a first or second round pick if you wanted to get a guy that you feel like you could start and be your number one tight end that can do what Julius Thomas can do on the football field. you'd have to be drafting one of those top guys at tight end. There's only 2 or 3 of them in the draft that have that kind of skill set. And so by getting Julius Thomas, then Miami could potentially put themselves into a position where maybe into the, second or third round, you may consider a tight end if a really, who's the guy from Alabama? OJ, trying to remember his name now. But,
the tight end?
Yeah, the tight end.
OJ Howard.
OJ Howard. Let's say just for whatever reason, drafts are funny things. Let's say the quarterbacks go crazy and whatever. Let's say he falls into the second round. He may be a reasonable pick for the Dolphins in the second round if he's there. And so, but you have the luxury now where you don't go into the draft knowing like we've got to make a move to get one of these tight ends because we have nobody right now. And so Julius Thomas immediately gives the Dolphins a very capable tight end. Ron hit it right on the head. That's why I've been saying all offseason, Adam Gase wants a tight end that is fast and big because you saw how many plays Marquise Gray made just out in the flat. Think of a guy that's that much bigger and faster than him getting those catches and then being able to turn up field. So he's going to be productive. As long as he's healthy, he'll be good. But again, you got to fill these holes. And so that's my biggest issue with Stills is I don't know that Stills realistically is going to be worth the contract he's probably going to get. But for Miami, that's the problem. If you let Stills go, if you don't get Julius Thomas, those are holes you got to fill. And you only have so many picks. Miami doesn't have a ton of picks this year in general. And their first and second round pick need to be guys that can come in and play. And they desperately are going to need help at D-tackle, D-end, and linebacker. Any 3 of those positions. I mean, they really don't have a starting right defensive end right now. Hopefully they'll re-sign Branch, but they don't have him. With Earl Mitchell going, they need a defensive tackle. I mean, you can't just plan on having Jordan Phillips and Sue play every snap. You're going to need another capable D-tackle to rotate in there. And the linebacking core, I mean, we've got to get Alonzo figured out. But after him, I mean, we need 2 linebackers probably minimum. And so we right now don't have enough draft picks to address our front 7 on the defensive line. And so we've got to do whatever we can do on our team not to create more holes that you got to fill, especially if you're going to utilize the draft to do it. And so I that's why I like that trade more than anything. That's why I liked the trade last year. I mean, last year he brought over a starting linebacker and a starting corner in a trade. And when you do that, that allows you to use your draft picks to fill other holes.
And that's something that they're going to have to look. Go ahead, Ron.
I just wanted to make one more thing about the offensive line, too. I'm less the offensive line situation, even as we say goodbye to Brandon Albert, even as we worry about Juwan James at right tackle, even as we wonder about Bushrod. It is nothing. Yeah, and Pouncey. It is nothing like it was before under Philbin years, and it's never going to be because we've got the right coaching. I mean, we had all kinds of problems on the offensive line at the beginning, and we had these scrubs that had been coached by Philbin, and we know who they are, and Dallas Thomas and all these guys, until he just said, you know what, these guys just aren't NFL players. I'm getting rid of these guys. I don't care if it puts a giant hole on I mean, they're just not, they don't belong on my team. Once he did that purge, it changed things, obviously. But you started to realize that it just took the right people for Gase and his coaching and his system. And that's always going to be okay, even if we don't have big names there. Yes, we want to have the best guys so we can, because we've seen how amazing it could be when we had Albert and Tunzel and Pouncey and all that. We were just unstoppable. So we hope that they go get some forces on the offensive line. But I don't imagine in the Gase years you're ever going to see what you saw under the Philbin years at the offensive line, regardless of the personnel there. Even if we just have a bunch of backups. I mean, look at what we faced in the Rams game. We were out, if I'm not mistaken, weren't we out Tunzel and Albert in that game, facing Robert Quinn and those guys? I mean, it should have been a disaster. In the Philbin days, it would have been 10 sacks. But those guys held their own because they're coached right and the scheme is right. So just kind of keep that into context and we can't freak out thinking this is the Philbin days because it's no longer the Philbin days, honestly. So I'm less concerned about that. Yeah, I want to see them make some upgrades there, but I don't feel like they need to go out and spend the first 2 picks and get the top draft picks or top free agents and all that. I think they're going to be okay with what they have, especially I'm more worried about Pouncey's health. I'm glad they didn't bring him back and they just let him ride it out. And that's just something that Adam Gase will always do. He's always going to err on the side of caution there. I like Tunzel at left tackle. I like Pouncey in the middle. And I think that's 2 Pro Bowl caliber guys you can really build an offensive line around. And, we're going to see what happens from there. But I'm not super concerned like I was back in the Philbin days. I don't feel like there's a need to freak out over it.
Well, if they don't sign a guard, then I will have a reason to freak out because I don't know, Ron.
They'll sign guards. Yeah, they'll sign guards. I just don't even worry about it. Trust me. They're going to get out there. They're going to make some signings, and they're going to find some pieces that fit. It's not necessarily mean we're going to be the Dallas Cowboys of offensive lines, but they'll find guys, they'll find guards, they'll find pieces that fit. I don't have any doubt on that in my mind.
I'll say this. I will be less worried about it if Pouncey can play at least 10 games. At least 10. That's what I'm asking. I'm not asking for 16 games a season. This is the thing. I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say people freak out too much about missing games. Because it's not just the fact that you missed games. How many games did you miss? Everybody nailed Pouncey for missing so many games this year, and suddenly he's just this horrible injury-prone player that we can't trust. Like, the most that the man had ever missed in his career up until this season was 4. 4. And after he came back, he moved over to guard just so they could keep Samson Sattelli in there because Samson Sattelli couldn't play guard. So Pouncey moved over for the sake of catering to the new guy who had come in to be his replacement while he recovered from his injury. It's this kind of mentality that just it gets on my nerves a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna try and calm down a minute. I go back to the debate that I had with Jorge Sedano. He mocked the Dolphins for trading Albert, who is a left tackle and more valuable to the team than a tight end. Not just a tight end, but a tight end who also is injury prone and misses games. Injuries happen. They just do. You can't assume that a player is going to get hurt. I look back at last season. Everybody assumed that probably by week 2, Kiko Alonso would be on injured reserve because Kiko keeps getting hurt. Kiko's not going to play. We wasted our pick. We wasted our draft pick, and we could have had a better player. Kiko's not even going to last. Kiko made it through pretty much the whole season. I think that maybe he missed 1 or 2 games. I'm not even sure about that much because Kiko played most of the year with a club on his hand. He could have sat out, waited until his hand was all better, could have gone on injured reserve. He played through it, and he was still the best linebacker the Dolphins had.
Still had the best. Saying much, though.
I mean, yes. Okay, but okay. I know, Ron. But it's like, was he good or not?
Oh yeah, he was great. I mean, the trade ended up. The trade just ended up. You couldn't have drawn it up better on. What was that movie with Kevin Costner and the Cleveland Browns? I can't remember what it was called. Draft Day. You couldn't have drawn a trade up better on Draft Day than what worked out for the Miami Dolphins, grabbing Tunzel, getting Kiko Alonso, and even Byron Maxwell kind of finally started to come into his own a little bit at the end there as far as how that worked out, because it just worked out beautifully for the Dolphins. We could dream of pulling off another trade that works out that good this season. Probably not likely to see that very often.
Yeah. I'm just looking at this whole situation right now, and I'm just thinking, stop worrying about whether this guy's gotten hurt in the past or not. The past is in the past. Do you want to look at the past, or do you want to move towards the future? If you want to go look at the past, then I suggest you go and find Joe Philbin again and bring him back to be the head coach. We can live in the past again. I don't think we need to live in the past. We need to move towards the future. All right. So enough with the injuries. Kiko is injury prone. He didn't get injured that badly. Well, I mean, okay, let me rephrase. He got injured badly, but he didn't stay out. He played. He played through it, and he was still good. Jermon Bushrod was another player who's injury prone. He played the whole season. Boom. Another one to bite the injury bug. Like, instead of getting bitten, he bit back. Brandon Albert, also injury prone. He played most of the season. and with his wrist practically shattered most of the time.
And I want to add in too. And I talked about this last season all the time, probably till people got tired of hearing me talk about it. I'll continue to. The importance that Adam Gase puts on the trainers, the sports science, and letting players heal from injury and not pushing them through injuries that don't need to be pushed through. He just has a different mindset than most NFL coaches. He truly is new school, millennial type when it comes to the NFL and the way he does that. And I believe that it'll show. It's gonna think about. I just feel like how many like Shanahan. Let's take the Shanahan situation with RG3. It was the same setup kind of as we had with Tannehill. You know, you've pushed a team to the playoffs. It looks like you're in the playoffs. Okay, now you're in the playoffs. You haven't torn it, so could you probably play? Yeah, you probably could play. Shanahan thought it was worth it for the risk of RG3. Adam Gase knew it wasn't worth the risk with Ryan Tannehill. And now we'll pay the dividends of that this offseason, because how much different is Tannehill's offseason looking without actually having a full ACL tear versus if he had gone in that playoff game and torn it? It's a totally different ball game. And Adam Gase even risked not making the playoffs and not bringing him back. And they decided, hey, let's not bring back Pouncey, even though we really need him. Let's just let him heal it up so next season he's ready to go. That is just, he's willing to give now to get later. And so few coaches in the NFL are that way. I think more of the younger guys are that way. And I think more and more people are starting to buy into that sports science. But I really believe that it helps our team. And we'll start to truly see the benefits of that even more this season.
Well said, Mr. Caniff. All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this show up. I know that Chad had to drop out because the man's a busy man, and he always takes some time out to be my co-host. And Ron, I appreciate you coming on with us to talk some Dolphin stuff. There will be more to talk about, no doubt. And as soon as March 9th rolls around, I'm sure that all hell is going to break loose. Everybody's going to start making signs, negotiating. There's going to be smoke and mirrors flying everywhere. Maybe there will be one inkling of truth here and there, just to get things, keep things fresh. Not everything is a lie. Keep an eye on Twitter for all the fake Adam Schefters and Ian Rappaports out there, because you got
fake news.
Fake news. Watch for the blue check mark.
Yes, nice. Excuse me. And also, I believe that the Dolphins are going to be, again, one of the most active teams from now through, especially into the free agency period. You'll see them as one of the most active teams all the way around. Get ready for more trades. Get ready for signings. I mean, the Dolphins don't sit on $50 million to save a few bucks. I mean, when you got Tannenbaum and you've got our owner, I mean, those guys together, you got Ross and Tannenbaum. I mean, that's and $50 million. Come on. And now you've got Adam Gase, and you just came off the playoffs. Guys, they're going to go for it. They're going to go all in, especially considering how few draft picks they do actually have and how they really want to make an impact for the team this season.
Well, I would hope that they're going to start by re-signing their own guys, like Tannenbaum said they would.
I believe that you'll see Branch and Stills stay a Dolphin. Beyond that, I don't know. I'm hoping Sims, but we're going to see. I still think that Koamisi gets the boot.
I don't know, man. I think maybe just keep him around at least through training camp and see if he makes it. Then, if not, you go ahead and give him the boot. But you draft linebackers anyway. If they don't draft at least one or two linebackers this season, I think I'm going to scream, because that would mean that. Okay, let me put it this way: if they don't sign a linebacker, because I'm sure everybody's looking at Donta Hightower, it's like, don't do it. He was a Patriot. Everybody looks good in Patriots colors, and then they suck wherever else they go. It's like, I'm sorry. I have people telling me, no, Hightower's really that good. Really? What other team has he played for besides New England? Anybody?
Yeah, I agree with you on the whole. If we don't sign/draft some linebackers of consequence, not fifth, sixth round, not scrub guy that's just going to be a roster spot. But if we don't sign some linebackers and get some linebackers of consequence, I'm going to go crazy. Like I said, I believe last show that we did a few weeks back, the reason we're in the situation we're in is because look at our draft history over the past 3-4 seasons and show me all the linebackers we've actually quote-unquote drafted. Yeah, we've tons of undrafted free agents. Show me how many we've drafted. I believe it's one Jordan Tripp in 3 or 4 seasons. And
he's
that's
not
why
even
we're
around.
sitting in that. And he's not even on the team. That's why we're in the situation we're in right now. And he was a 5th rounder to begin with. So, I mean, come on, guys. It's time. We're in that situation because you haven't drafted any linebackers. Time to add a free agent at least. Time to draft some guys. It just has to happen.
That's going to have to be a topic for another show because I wanted to go into the need versus best player available discussion, but we don't have time for that right now. We'll have to save that for next week. All right.
Yeah, we still got time. We still got plenty of time before free agency and the draft for sure.
Oh, for sure. The draft. Heck, I got to get some draft guys in here. All right. Well, I think we're going to call it here. Thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed, and let us know if there's anything you want us to talk about for next show. We're on Twitter at you can find me at Louis D. Sung. Yes, I did change my name. You can find Ron at Finn's Broadcaster. You can find Chad at GoFins4, the number 4, SB. And, of course, you can always tag us at PhinManiacs and find us on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter. You can comment on articles if you want to. We can do that, too. There's no shortage of ways to contact us. And, of course, it's going to be up on YouTube, so you can always get to us through there. So, again, thank you all so much for joining us. We'll see you all next time for another episode of PhinManiacs.com podcast.